Marcus had always prided himself on having the most pristine lawn in Willowbrook Estates. Every Saturday morning, he could be found meticulously trimming edges with surgical precision, his neighbors often joking that his grass looked like it belonged on a golf course. The emerald carpet stretched perfectly from his front porch to the sidewalk, bordered by prize-winning rose bushes that had taken him 3 years to cultivate. It was his sanctuary, his masterpiece, his slice of suburban perfection. That tranquil existence shattered on a Tuesday morning in September when he discovered fresh tire tracks carved deep into his beloved turf. The indentations formed two perfect parallel lines running from the street straight across his lawn to within inches of his front steps. Chunks of grass lay scattered like casualties of war, and his precious underground sprinkler system had clearly taken a beating. Marcus stood there in his bathrobe, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips, staring at the violation with the same expression one might reserve for discovering their car had been keyed. "What in the hell?" he muttered, crouching down to examine the damage more closely. The tire treads were still fresh, probably made sometime during the night. Deep gouges in the soil revealed where the vehicle had turned around, using his front yard as a personal driveway. Initially, Marcus assumed it was a one-time incident. Perhaps someone had been drinking, or maybe there was an emergency that required quick access to his neighbor's house. He spent the entire day repairing the damage, carefully replacing chunks of sod and realigning his sprinkler heads. By evening, his lawn looked nearly normal again, though he could still see the faint outlines where the tires had been. But Wednesday morning brought a fresh set of tracks. This time, the violation was even more brazen. Not only had the mystery driver used his lawn as a parking space, but they also managed to clip his prized world's best grandpa garden gnome, leaving the ceramic figure headless and tragic-looking among the marigolds. Marcus's jaw tightened as he surveyed the scene. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate, repeated trespassing, and he was going to get to the bottom of it. The breakthrough came Thursday evening when he positioned himself at his living room window with a pair of binoculars and a thermos of coffee. At exactly 11:47 p.m., a silver SUV came cruising down Maple Street with the casual confidence of someone who owned the neighborhood. The vehicle slowed, turned directly onto his lawn without so much as a pause, and parked there like it was a designated spot. Out stepped Karen Weatherby from 3 houses down. Marcus had encountered Karen exactly twice since moving to Willowbrook Estates 2 years ago. Both interactions had left him with the distinct impression that she believed the world existed solely for her convenience. She was the type of person who parked across 2 spaces at the grocery store and complained when asked to move. The type who returned obviously used items to customer service with elaborate stories about manufacturing defects. Now, apparently, she had decided that his front lawn was her personal parking garage. From his binoculars, Marcus watched in growing disbelief as Karen casually strolled to her own house, leaving her SUV planted on his grass like she'd just discovered the world's most convenient parking spot. She didn't look back, didn't show any sign of guilt or awareness that she'd just committed an act of suburban warfare. The audacity was breathtaking. Marcus decided to handle the situation like a civilized adult. Friday morning, after discovering Karen's SUV had once again transformed his lawn into a personal parking lot, he marched down to her house with righteous determination and knocked on her door. Karen answered wearing a leopard print bathrobe and an expression that suggested his presence was roughly as welcome as a tax audit. Her bleached blonde hair was piled into a messy bun secured with what appeared to be a pencil, and she held a cup of coffee like it was a weapon. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone clearly indicated she had no intention of helping anyone with anything. "Hi, Karen, I'm Marcus from 1247, he began, forcing his voice to remain pleasant. "I think there might be some confusion about parking. Your car has been in my front yard the last few nights, and it's causing some damage to my lawn." Karen's eyes narrowed as if he'd just accused her of international espionage. "Your lawn? The street is public property, last I checked." "Well, yes, the street is public," Marcus replied, his smile becoming increasingly strained. "But my lawn isn't. It's the grassy area between the street and my house, with the rose bushes and the sprinkler system that your tires have been. Look, Marcus, whatever. I park where it's convenient. If you don't like it, put up a fence." Karen started to close the door, then paused as if struck by sudden inspiration. "Actually, you should be thanking me. I'm keeping your grass from getting too long." The door slammed shut with a finality that left Marcus standing there, mouth agape, processing what had just occurred. In Karen's twisted logic, she was doing him a favor by destroying his property. That weekend, Karen's parking habits evolved from inconsiderate to aggressively destructive. Not content with simply using his lawn as her personal driveway, she began treating it like a multi-day parking garage. Saturday morning, Marcus discovered her SUV had been there all night, parked at such an angle that it had completely flattened his prize-winning begonias and cracked one of his decorative stepping stones. But Sunday brought the ultimate insult. Marcus was enjoying a peaceful morning coffee on his front porch when Karen's SUV came barreling across his lawn with all the subtlety of an invasion force. This time, she didn't just park, she executed a complete three-point turn directly over his newly installed irrigation system. The sound of plastic sprinkler heads snapping under her tires was like fingernails on a chalkboard. Water began shooting skyward from the broken system, creating an impromptu fountain show that would have been beautiful if it weren't so infuriating. Karen climbed out of her vehicle, noticed the geyser she created, and actually had the audacity to cup her hands under the spray to take a drink. "Thanks for the water feature," she called out cheerfully, as if Marcus had installed it specifically for her refreshment. Marcus stood frozen on his porch, coffee mug gripped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. This wasn't just parking anymore. This was psychological warfare. The breaking point came Monday evening when Marcus returned from work to find Karen hosting what appeared to be an impromptu tailgate party on his front lawn. Her SUV was parked in its usual spot, but now it was surrounded by 3 other vehicles and a group of women holding wine glasses and lawn chairs. They'd set up a portable speaker system and were playing music loud enough to wake the historically dead. "Hey, neighbor." Karen waved from her folding chair, positioned directly on top of where his prize-winning daffodils used to bloom. "Hope you don't mind, we're celebrating Janet's divorce. Your lawn has such great acoustics." Marcus realized that polite conversation and neighborly requests were never going to work with Karen. She had declared war on his property, and traditional diplomacy had failed spectacularly. As he watched her friends grinding their high heels into his carefully cultivated soil, a new kind of determination began forming in his mind. If Karen wanted to play games with his lawn, perhaps it was time to change the rules entirely. Marcus spent the next 3 days in what could only be described as strategic reconnaissance mode. He observed Karen's patterns with the dedication of a wildlife researcher studying a particularly destructive species. Every morning at 7:15 a.m., she backed out of her driveway and drove directly across his lawn to reach the street, apparently because reversing into traffic was too inconvenient for someone of her importance. Every evening between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, she returned via the same route, treating his front yard like her personal express lane. But it was Thursday afternoon that provided the crucial intelligence Marcus needed. He was pretending to tend his surviving rose bushes when he overheard Karen on her phone standing beside her SUV, which was naturally parked on his grass. Her voice carried clearly across the yard as she complained loudly to whoever would listen. "I don't care if it takes an extra 5 minutes," she was saying. "I'm out walking around to the front door like some kind of peasant. This is so much more convenient, and besides, what's he going to do about it? Call the police? Please." She paused, listening to the response, then let out a harsh laugh. "Exactly. And if he tries to block me, I'll just call it harassment. I know my rights." Marcus's grip tightened on his pruning shears as he continued eavesdropping. "The best part is, his lawn is actually perfect for parking," Karen continued. "It's like he designed it just for me. Nice and flat, no rocks or anything to scratch my paint. I told Janet she should start using the Wilsons' lawn on the other side. Their grass is just as good." That evening, Marcus retreated to his home office and fired up his laptop. If Karen thought she could outsmart him through sheer audacity, she was about to discover that two could play the strategic game. But while her strategy relied on bullying and entitlement, it would be built on careful planning and intimate knowledge of his own property. First, he researched local ordinances and property laws. Karen was technically correct that calling the police would be complicated. The damage was minimal each time, and proving deliberate trespassing for parking might be difficult. But Marcus wasn't interested in legal remedies anymore. He was interested in natural consequences. Next, he pulled out the original survey maps from when he bought the house. The documents revealed something fascinating that he'd completely forgotten about. His front yard sat on top of a natural drainage area. The previous owners had installed an elaborate network of French drains and soil amendments to prevent water from pooling, which explained why his lawn had always been so perfect for growing grass. But those same drainage systems could be modified. Marcus spent hours researching soil composition, water retention, and the precise conditions needed to create what landscapers politely called challenging terrain. He learned about clay soil additives, strategic watering techniques, and the exact moisture levels that would transform solid ground into what his research euphemistically referred to as unstable surface conditions. The more he read, the more excited he became. Karen had chosen to wage war on his lawn because it was convenient and solid. But convenience was a two-way street, and solid ground was surprisingly easy to manipulate when you understood the science behind it. Friday morning brought the final piece of inspiration. Marcus was checking his mail when he noticed his neighbor Bob working in his garden. Bob was a retired engineer who'd spent 40 years designing drainage systems for construction projects. "Morning, Bob," Marcus called out casually. "Quick question about water drainage. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to create a temporary marshy area in their yard, maybe for a rain garden or something, how would they go about it? Bob's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of an expert who found someone interested in his specialty. Well, that's easy. You want to disrupt the existing drainage, add some clay to hold water, and then saturate the area thoroughly. The key is timing. You need the water to penetrate deep enough to destabilize the soil structure, but not so much that it just runs off. He went on to explain the precise ratios of clay to existing soil, the optimal watering schedule, and even suggested some natural additives that would make the mixture particularly adhesive. Of course, Bob added with a wink, you want to be careful about timing. Something like that would be a real problem if someone tried to drive over it before it had a chance to dry out properly. Marcus nodded solemnly, as if this was purely theoretical information he'd never dream of applying. Absolutely, timing would be everything. That evening, as Karen's SUV once again carved fresh ruts across his lawn, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a notebook, sketching diagrams and calculating quantities. He had her schedule memorized, understood her motivations, and now possessed the technical knowledge to transform her greatest convenience into her most spectacular inconvenience. The trap was ready to be set. All he needed now was the perfect opportunity and the courage to spring it. Marcus chose Saturday morning to begin what he privately called Operation Swamp Thing. Karen's weekend routine was predictable. She'd leave around 10 a.m. for her usual shopping expedition and return between 11 p.m. and midnight, giving him nearly 13 hours to transform his front lawn from convenient parking spot into automotive quicksand. The first step was the most labor-intensive. Marcus had spent Friday evening at the garden center, purchasing what the confused clerk had assumed was an ambitious landscaping project: 50 pounds of bentonite clay, 3 bags of peat moss, and enough organic soil amendments to fill a small swimming pool. He'd also rented what appeared to be a small tiller, claiming he was refreshing his lawn for spring planting. As soon as Karen's SUV disappeared around the corner, Marcus sprang into action with the efficiency of a special operations team. He used the tiller to break up the compacted soil in her favorite parking area, creating a roughly car-sized rectangle of loose earth. The machine chewed through the turf with satisfying aggression, turning his previously pristine lawn into what looked like a small construction site. Next came the clay mixture. Following Bob's hypothetical specifications, Marcus worked the bentonite clay into the loosened soil, creating a base layer that would hold water like a sponge and turn slippery as ice when saturated. The peat moss went in next, providing organic matter that would make the entire mixture gorgeously adhesive. By noon, Marcus had transformed Karen's preferred parking spot into what appeared to be freshly tilled garden soil. To the casual observer, it looked like he was simply preparing for some ambitious landscaping project. But beneath the innocent-looking surface lay a carefully engineered trap that would make quicksand look user-friendly. The next phase required patience and precise timing. Marcus set up multiple sprinklers around the prepared area and began the delicate process of saturation. Too little water, and the trap wouldn't be effective. Too much, and it would be obviously boggy even to someone as oblivious as Karen. The goal was to create what engineers called bearing capacity failure, ground that looked solid, but would turn to soup the moment significant weight was applied. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus maintained his watering schedule with the dedication of a Swiss timekeeper. Every 2 hours, he'd soak the area thoroughly and monitor the absorption rate. By 6 p.m., the soil had achieved the perfect consistency. Firm enough on top to look normal, but saturated deep enough to ensure that any vehicle attempting to park there would sink like the Titanic. As evening approached, Marcus began the final preparations. He scattered some loose grass seed over the area to make it appear like normal yard maintenance, then strategically placed his garden hose nearby as if he'd simply been watering his lawn. To complete the illusion, he even set up a small caution, wet grass sign, the kind of thoughtful touch that would make his innocence seem beyond question. The hardest part was the waiting. Marcus positioned himself in his living room with a clear view of the front yard, a cup of coffee, and barely contained excitement. He disabled his porch light to ensure the area would be dimly lit when Karen returned. Not dark enough to be suspicious, but certainly not bright enough for her to notice that her favorite parking spot had been transformed into an automotive trap. At 11:43 p.m., right on schedule, Karen's headlights appeared at the end of Maple Street. Marcus's heart rate accelerated as he watched her SUV approach with its usual arrogant confidence. She didn't slow down, didn't pause to examine the yard. Why would she? This was her routine, her convenient shortcut, her personal parking space that she'd claimed through sheer audacity. The SUV turned onto his lawn with practiced ease, headlights sweeping across the seemingly innocent grass. For a split second, Marcus wondered if his trap would actually work or if he'd simply spent an entire day playing in the dirt like an overgrown child. Then Karen hit the bog. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Her front wheels sank into the saturated soil with a wet, sucking sound that was audible even through Marcus's closed windows. The SUV lurched forward as Karen gunned the engine, apparently thinking she could power through whatever minor obstacle she'd encountered. This only made things magnificently worse. The spinning tires threw fountains of muddy clay in all directions, splattering her windshield and creating a spray pattern that looked like a chocolate fountain having a nervous breakdown. The more she accelerated, the deeper the vehicle sank, until her SUV was listing at an angle that suggested it was preparing for submarine duty. Marcus watched in fascination as Karen's headlights illuminated the chaos she was creating. Through her windshield, he could see her frantically working the steering wheel and gear shift, her face a mask of confusion and growing panic. The engine revved higher and higher, but the SUV only settled deeper into Marcus's perfectly engineered bog. Within minutes, her vehicle had achieved what could generously be called maximum penetration, sunk so deep that opening the driver's door would have required scuba gear. Marcus allowed himself exactly 30 seconds to savor the spectacular sight of Karen's SUV embedded in his front yard like a modern art installation titled Consequences of Entitlement. Then, channeling his inner Good Samaritan, he flicked on his porch light and stepped outside with an expression of carefully practiced concern. "Oh my goodness, Karen," he called out, jogging toward the trapped vehicle with what he hoped looked like genuine alarm. "Are you okay? What happened?" Through her mud-splattered windshield, Karen's face was a masterpiece of fury and disbelief. Her perfectly styled hair had wilted from stress sweating, and her leopard print top was now accessorized with flecks of clay that had somehow made it through her closed windows. She was frantically pressing buttons on her phone, presumably trying to call for rescue. "Get me out of here," she screamed, her voice muffled but clearly audible through the glass. "Your stupid lawn tried to eat my SAR." Marcus circled the vehicle with the careful attention of a concerned neighbor, taking mental photographs of the glorious scene. The SUV had sunk so deep that mud was creeping up past the wheel wells, and her expensive alloy rims were completely buried. Her rear bumper was the only part still maintaining any dignity above ground level. "This is so strange," Marcus said loudly enough for her to hear. "The soil must have gotten oversaturated from all the rain we've been having. I was actually planning to call a landscaper about drainage issues." He paused as if struck by sudden realization. "Oh wait, were you trying to park on my lawn again?" The look Karen shot him through the windshield could have melted steel. She managed to crack her window about 2 inches, apparently the maximum safe opening before mud would start pouring into her vehicle. "You did this on purpose," she shrieked through the gap. "This is sabotage. This is assault with a deadly lawn." "Karen, that's a serious accusation," Marcus replied with the wounded tone of someone whose character had been unfairly questioned. "I've been having drainage problems for weeks. Why would you think I'd deliberately?" He gestured at the bogs surrounding her vehicle. "I mean, look at this mess. This is going to cost me a fortune to fix." A crowd was beginning to gather. Bob appeared first, drawn by the commotion, followed by the Hendersons from across the street and Mrs. Chen with her 3 small dogs. Soon, half the neighborhood was standing around Karen's trapped SUV like it was a tourist attraction. "How did this happen?" Bob asked with perfectly feigned innocence, though Marcus caught the tiny wink he threw in his direction. "Drainage failure," Marcus explained solemnly. "I've been worried about this area ever since we had that heavy rain last month. The soil has been really unstable." He looked directly at Karen's partially open window. "I actually tried to warn Karen about parking on the lawn, but she said it was convenient." Mrs. Henderson gasped. "You've been parking on Marcus's lawn?" "Karen, that's his private property." Through her window crack, Karen's voice reached a pitch that could summon dolphins. "He booby-trapped his yard. This is entrapment. This is lawn terrorism." "Karen," Marcus said gently, "I think you might be a little confused from the shock. Would you like me to call a tow truck? Though I have to warn you, it's going to be expensive. Probably need a heavy-duty recovery vehicle for something like this." The tow truck arrived an hour later, along with what appeared to be half the Willowbrook Fire Department. Not because there was an emergency, but because news of Karen's automotive misadventure had spread through the community like wildfire. The extraction process took another 2 hours and required 2 separate tow trucks working in tandem. Karen's SUV emerged from the bog looking like it had competed in a demolition derby. Mud coated every surface, the undercarriage had acquired several pounds of clay that would require industrial cleaning, and one of her side mirrors had been sacrificed to the extraction process. The final insult came when the tow truck driver handed her a bill that made her face turn the same color as her mud-stained leather interior. $600, she gasped. "For what?" "Hazardous recovery operation," the driver explained cheerfully. "Plus surcharge for nighttime service and difficult terrain access. Your vehicle was really stuck there, ma'am. Like really stuck." As the convoy of emergency vehicles finally departed, taking Karen and her humbled SUV with them, Marcus surveyed his front yard. The bog trap had been destroyed in the extraction process, leaving his lawn looking like a small battlefield. But it was his battlefield, and he won decisively. Karen never parked on his lawn again. In fact, she went out of her way to avoid even looking in his direction when she passed his house. The few times their paths crossed at the mailbox, she'd hurry inside with the urgent efficiency of someone who learned that actions have consequences. Word of the incident spread throughout Willowbrook Estates with the speed of suburban legend. Other neighbors who'd been dealing with Karen's various entitled behaviors suddenly found their own creative solutions to boundary issues. Property lines became sacred, parking became respectful, and the entire neighborhood seemed to develop a renewed appreciation for the concept of asking permission. Marcus replanted his lawn with extra care, installing proper drainage and even adding some decorative stones to prevent future drainage failures. But every time he watered his grass, he smiled at the memory of that perfect night when natural consequences and careful engineering had combined to deliver the most satisfying lesson in neighborly respect that Willowbrook Estates had ever witnessed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a dish served cold, it's a bog served exactly when your neighbor least expects it.